I leaned in, voice calm but lethal. Yeah, check your phone. Those loan documents you signed just got emailed to you. Turns out Brandon used your parents' house as collateral without telling you. I 34M, never thought I'd be typing this out, but here I am at 2 a.m. in my friend's guest room, trying to make sense of everything. My wife Selene, 31F, and I have been married for 6 years. We're not rich, never have been, never pretended to be. I drive a 2012 Accord that's paid off and runs fine. We live in a modest 3-bedroom house in a decent neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it was our home. Things got rough 3 months ago when the company I worked for downsized. I had savings and unemployment, plus some side work. We weren't drowning, just treading water. Selene picked up extra shifts at work, and I was grateful. I spent my days sending out applications and working on a business plan. I thought we were in this together. Last night was her sister's monthly family dinner. 35F always hosts these things, and her husband Brandon, 38M, loves showing off their new house. He recently bought a 2024 BMW X7, something he made sure everyone noticed when we pulled up in my. I noticed something was off the moment we arrived. Selene was checking her phone constantly, barely looking at me. Brandon was smirking more than usual, making little comments about real men providing for their families. I kept quiet, watching. The way they whispered when I walked by, how kept giving Selene these knowing looks. During dinner, Brandon was bragging about his latest house flip. I've been in construction long enough to catch the red flags in his renovation stories. Cutting corners, using unlicensed workers, rushing jobs. I made mental notes while nodding along. Professional habit, I guess. Then Selene dropped the bomb. She pulled out our bank statement, the one showing a missed mortgage payment that I'd been working to resolve. Threw it on the table like evidence in a trial. Look at this, she said, her voice shaking. We almost lost our house because he can't keep a job. I'm working doubles while he sits at home planning some fantasy business. I stayed quiet, watching everyone's reactions. Reed, my father-in-law, shaking his head. Quincy, Brandon's cousin, trying to hide his smirk. Brandon leaning back, enjoying the show. Maybe if he spent less time dreaming and more time working, Brandon chimed in, he could afford something better than that old out there. Selene deserves better than some wannabe entrepreneur who can't even make a house payment. That's when Selene threw my wallet on the table. It had fallen out in her car earlier. Found this when I was driving, $200 in it, $200. While I'm killing myself at work, he's hiding money. I stood up slowly, collected my wallet, and looked around the table. Really looked. Memorized their faces, their expressions, the contempt, the mockery, the satisfaction, Brandon's smug grin, his performative concern. Reed's disappointment. The money's for the business license, I said quietly, and this paid for. I turned to Selene. The mortgage payment's been handled, check your email. I walked out, ignoring their calls, got in drove to my friend Quincy's place. He owns that auto repair shop on Madison, the one that services half the luxury cars in town, including Brandon's precious BMW. Turned off my phone after the first few calls. This morning, I found 13 voicemails. Selene panicking about the joint account, Brandon suddenly interested in investing in my business plan, trying to play peacemaker. I'm typing this from Quincy's, using his. My phone's still off. They think I'm defeated, broken, but sitting here I'm seeing everything clearly for the first time. The missed payment wasn't the real problem. It was just their excuse, looking back through our photos on my laptop. 6 years of memories, funny how you can look at the same pictures and see something completely different. All those family dinners, those smiling faces, now I see what was really behind those smiles. I've got meetings lined up this week. Contractors I've worked with before, suppliers who know my name. Turns out a lot of people in this town aren't fans of Brandon's business practices. And my business plan, it's been ready for weeks, just needed the right motivation to pull the trigger. They thought throwing my old in my face was an insult. Thing is, that car's paid for. No debt. Unlike Brandon's BMW that Quincy says is already having transmission issues after just 3 months. I'm not posting this for advice, just needed to write it down somewhere. Got a busy day tomorrow. Lawyers to see, papers to file, hands to shake. The funny thing about being underestimated, people don't see you coming. Update, 2 weeks since my first post. I've maintained radio silence, no returned calls, no responses to messages. Just been doing my thing. Called every day, then started texting from different numbers. Where are you? What's happening with the accounts? Why aren't you answering my mom? I've been busy. Remember Quincy, my friend with the auto shop? Turns out he doesn't just fix cars. Half the successful business owners in town trust him with their BMWs, Mercedes, and other grown-up toys, and they love to talk, especially about their construction projects. You know, Quincy said to me last night, handing me a beer, funny thing about Brandon's BMW, 3 months old and already transmission problems. And you know what? He can't even afford the repairs. I was sitting in his office, going through papers. The last 6 months, I wasn't just dreaming about business like thought. I was learning online business management courses, building codes, financial planning every spare minute. There was a knock at the door. It was Reed, my father-in-law. Didn't expect to see him here. He looked uncomfortable. We need to talk about Brandon's work on my properties. I silently gestured to a chair. Listen, he started. I know that dinner we all behaved not great, but that's not it. I started checking the work Brandon did, and I pulled out a folder of documents, photos, estimates, inspector reports, you mean this, about how he used unlicensed workers or the low-grade materials at premium prices. Reed went pale. How did you? I wasn't sitting at home dreaming like everyone thinks. I was watching, learning, preparing. Next day, I opened my office, small but professional. 3 experienced crews who knew me from past work immediately agreed to join. They were tired of Brandon's way of doing things, too. The phone kept blowing up. Her family, even Brandon. Now he wanted to discuss partnership opportunities. I didn't answer, just worked. First major contract came unexpectedly. The Wilsons, one of Brandon's best clients. Their kitchen he renovated started falling apart after 6 months. They found me through mutual connection. We heard you do things right the first time, Mrs. Wilson said. I did their renovation perfectly. Right price with warranty. They told their friends. Yesterday called crying, please, Brandon's panicking. Clients are canceling contracts. The bank is asking questions. He's not sleeping. Interesting, I replied. I wasn't sleeping either when your husband laughed at my, by the way, how's his BMW? Still in repair at Quincy's. Sent a long message this morning about how she misses me, how she's sorry, how she didn't know about my plans and studies. I read it and delete it. My business is growing, slowly but surely. Doing work right, no cutting corners. Every satisfied customer brings 3 more. And you know what? I still drive that same. It runs perfectly. Just like my plan. Today got a letter from Brandon's lawyer, something about unfair competition and defamation. Funny thing, truth is the ultimate defense against defamation. Even funnier. Next week I'm meeting with the bank that gave Brandon his business loan. Seems they have questions about some of his declarations. Quincy says Brandon's BMW needs major repairs. Expensive ones. Very expensive. Update 2. I wasn't planning to post again so soon, but after what happened it's last night, I need to get this off my chest. 2 months of silence from me had everyone on edge. I'd been focused on work, letting success do the talking. My company's been growing, nothing flashy, just solid work and word of mouth. Every project we finish brings 3 more referrals, mostly fixing other people's mistakes. Yesterday started normal. I was having dinner with Quincy, discussing his auto shop's expansion when Brandon walked in. Brandon stopped dead when he saw me, his face turning that special shade of red I've come to enjoy. You son of a bitch, he shouted across the restaurant. Heads turned, the Wilsons, the Hendersons, all my clients. I took another bite of my burger. Public place, Brandon, inside voice. He stormed over, trailing behind, trying to calm him down. You're sabotaging me, spreading lies about my work. Truth hurts, doesn't it? I kept eating. How's that BMW running? Heard that transmission's making some interesting noises. You think you're so smart. His hands were shaking. While you were playing entrepreneur, Selene was crying herself to sleep. She lost weight, she's depressed, fascinating. I cut him off. Speaking of Selene, how's that loan you convinced her to co-sign for you last year? The one you used for your business expansion. Head snapped toward Brandon. What loan? Perfect timing. Selene walked in, because of course she did. Brandon must texted her. She looked different, thinner, tired. For a second I almost felt something. Then I remembered that dinner. Please, she started. This has gone too far. Brandon's losing clients, worried about their mortgage. I laughed. Which one, the first or the second, Brandon took out without telling her. The restaurant was dead silent now. Turned to Brandon. Second mortgage, what is he talking about? Brandon lunged for me. Not a punch, he just grabbed my shirt. Security stepped in fast. As they were escorting him out, he was screaming about lawsuits, about ruining me. I raised my voice slightly, making sure everyone heard. Like you ruined the Wilsons' house with that mold problem you covered up, or the electrical work that nearly caught fire. Selene tried one last time, tears streaming. I made a mistake. We all did. You've made your point. I stood up, dropped cash for the bill. No, I'm just getting started. Check your phone. Those loan documents you signed just got emailed to you. Turns out Brandon used our house as collateral for one of his deals, but he never mentioned that. The look on her face, pure shock. She spun toward Brandon, who was still being held by security. You did what? I walked past them, stopped at the door. By the way, Brandon. Quincy says that BMW repair estimate just went up. Something about the cooling system now. But hey, at least you look successful, right? Outside, I got in my. Through the window, I could see the chaos. Screaming at Brandon about the second mortgage. Selene having what looked like a panic attack. Brandon trying to explain himself to both women at once. My phone started blowing up, demanding answers about the loan. Mom asking if I had proof about Brandon's deals. Selene's texts getting increasingly desperate. This morning, drove past Brandon's house, for sale sign in the yard. His precious BMW wasn't in the driveway, probably still at Quincy's shop. My phone shows 31 missed calls. Funny thing about success, it has a way of exposing everyone's lies. Brandon's perfect life was built on debt and deception. Selene chose his side, backed his plays. Now they all get to live with those choices. Got a meeting tomorrow with the Hendersons, another of Brandon's satisfied customers. Their deck is starting to collapse after 6 months. Should be an interesting conversation. Edit, yes, everything I revealed is documented. No, I didn't hack anything. Brandon's lies were just poorly hidden. Edit 2, next week should be interesting. Just got a text from his father. Apparently, Brandon did some work on his rental properties last year. He wants to discuss concerns. Final update. Didn't expect to be making another update, but after what happened at his house last night, I need to share this. Remember Brandon's BMW that he couldn't afford to fix? It's mine now. Bought it at auction for a fraction of what he owed. Not because I wanted it, I still drive my. Just wanted him to see it parked outside my office, fully restored every single day. Quincy did an amazing job with the repairs, but let me back up. Last month, Brandon and lost their house. Not because of me, their own lies caught up with them. 3 mortgages, maxed out credit cards, loans using other people's collateral. Classic house of cards. They moved into a 2-bedroom apartment, the one right across from where I first started, ironically. Still not speaking to Brandon after finding out he used her inheritance as collateral for a business loan. Then yesterday, invited everyone for a family meeting at his house. I almost didn't go. Glad I did, pulled up in the BMWs for display only. Brandon's face when he saw me walk in. Priceless, he was sitting on the same couch where he'd laughed at me 6 months ago. No designer clothes now. No smirk, what's he doing here? Brandon stood up pointing after what he did to us. His voice cut through the room. Sit down, Brandon. We're here to talk about what you did. Turns out had hired an accountant to review all of Brandon's work on the family's properties. The numbers didn't add up. Materials that were paid for but never installed. Workers who were supposedly licensed but weren't. Safety corners cut to save money. Was there too, looking even thinner than before. When our eyes met, she started to say something, but I turned away. Some bridges stay burned. I trusted you, was shouting now, put my reputation on the line for you. And this is how you repay us. By scamming your own family. Brandon tried to defend himself. The market was tough, I had to cut some. Cut corners, I interrupted, like the unlicensed electrical work at the Wilsons, or the mold you painted over at the Hendersons. You, Brandon lunged at me. And his son had to hold him back. You stole everything from me. My business, my reputation. Your BMW, I smiled. How's the bus working out for you? That's when lost it. Stop it, both of you just stop. She was crying, makeup running. This isn't what family does, family. I laughed, like when you all sat around this table and laughed at the failure who couldn't make his mortgage payment. The payment that was actually made, by the way. You just never bothered to check before putting on your little show. Brandon broke free, got in my face. You think you're better than me, with your perfect little business and your... I pulled out my phone, showed him the screen. Speaking of business, remember that contract you signed last week? The desperate one trying to save your company. I turned to. He used your parents' house as collateral. Forged your dad's signature. The room exploded, screaming at Brandon. Reed calling his lawyer. Brandon trying to explain, having another breakdown. I walked to the door, stopped, turned around. Oh, almost forgot. Brandon, remember how you always made fun of called it a poor man's car? I tossed him the BMW keys. It's fixed now. Quincy did great work. I'm selling it next week to the Wilson's son. You remember them, right? The family whose house you nearly burned down with that cheap wiring. As I left, I heard things crashing inside. Brandon screaming about lawsuits again. Yelling about divorce. Reed threatening to press charges over the forgery. This morning, my phone's been blowing up. Sent a long text about how I've changed, how I'm not the man she married. She's right. I'm not the man who would sit quietly while being humiliated. Brandon's been calling from different numbers. Left a voicemail begging for a job, any position, even entry level. Deleted without listening to the end. The family's in shambles. Brandon and are divorcing. Is moving back in with her parents. Reed's facing questions about his own business dealings. The perfect family destroyed by their own lies. Me, business is booming. That I was mocked for still runs perfectly. No payments, no debt, just like my business. Karma's not a bitch, she's just really, really patient. Edit to those asking, yes, I have documentation for everything. No, I won't press charges. Living well is better revenge. Edit 2, Brandon just got served divorce papers. At my office, where he came to beg for work again, the process server used to be his best friend.